this event today. Let's consider a number of administrative aspects. We'll have 2 languages at this meeting. For those of you who would need interpretation, please pick up the headphones. There's 2 buttons in there. A, that's Ukrainian, and B, that's English. Thank you.
Dear guests, good morning, welcome. Before we start our event, let's discuss a few technical issues. We will have 2 languages, Ukrainian and English, so for those who need the translation, please, a lady will help you out. The A bottom is for Ukrainian and the B bottom is for English. Thank you.
Колеги, вітаю.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our event on the anti-corruption events. And for those of you joining this event, the Global UN Compact.
Кодекси етики, тренінги для своїх працівників. Але ж ми бачимо, яким чином малий та середній бізнес, напевно, не хоче втручатися в це, вважаючи, що корупція його не стосується, чи антикорупція – це не те, в що варто вкладатися. Із нашими робочими групами ми з'ясували, що ми дійсно можемо впливати на розвиток нашого малого-середнього бізнесу для того, щоб його виводити на ту ж, скажімо так, ланку, в якій він може працювати повноцінним ланцюжком постачальників для відповідального бізнесу як в Україні, так і за кордоном. Протягом цих більше ніж 1 рік ми створювали онлайн-програму розвитку малого та середнього бізнесу з антикорупції та комплаєнсу. Це такий продукт мас-маркет, який є першим кроком для того, щоб залучити компанії взагалі замислитися над тим, для чого йому це потрібно. На сьогоднішній день у нас вже є повноцінна програма. Цього тижня вийде
The SMEs, where to start from. And then we worked, of course, together with our team and in parallel with you. We worked in the frames of this program over the hard we are part, and we searched for money as well in order to implement this course, because we understood that the effective content for many people to watch, it costs some money. And as of now, I can say that we found the funding for this project. We have received additional funding from our global office, and we are starting a parallel program. One of our programs deals with the SMEs, while the other one would be providing for our cooperation with the public agencies. So we'll finalize our online course, and our task is to have the state engaged in a more effective manner for making sure there is a platform for dialogue in between of the state and enterprises in order to resolve this challenge. So that was a brief kind of a vision of what has been already done and what we will try to do in the frames of this program. And I'm very grateful for our businesses to join that. For those businesses believe that there is a need to work on the resolution of those challenges. And it's great that the compliance directors, compliance officers, the leaders of the businesses are engaging, are cooperating. And they would need to understand that the others would also be able to engage and to work on this process. So thank you for joining us today. This is the end of our introductory speech. And now I'd like to pass the floor to Denis Besadic, the head of the office of the head of the permanent office of UN in Ukraine.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the resident coordinator and humanitarian coordinator here in Ukraine, Ms. Osnat Lubrani, allow me to express our sincerest thanks and appreciation to the organizer, the Global Compact, but also to all of you, the Ukrainian businessmen, government officials, and CSOs, and to congratulate you on the upcoming International Anti-Corruption Day, which will be held on the 9th of December. The UN has recently conducted and finalized a common country assessment in which it underscores key challenges and opportunities affecting the country's development. In its findings, which coincide with those of both national and international partners, corruption is found to be the most visible and most cross-dimensional decelerator of development here in Ukraine. Corruption undermines the achievements of the SDGs and has a negative impact on peace, security, the rule of law, gender equality, the environment, as well as human rights. Here in Ukraine, corruption has affected governance, economic development, and public trust. Moreover, according to the World Bank governance indicators, Ukraine is significantly behind its regional peers. The 2020 Corruption Perception Index places Ukraine 117th out of 180 countries. Corruption is also fueled by a large public sector. This requires reducing the role of the state in the economy. The impact of corruption has been further magnified by the COVID pandemic. And here, more work needs to be done in order to buttress and support anti-corruption measures and safeguards. Furthermore, the worst consequences of corruption are borne by the poor, the marginalized, and vulnerable people. Therefore, it is crucial for Ukraine to implement anti-corruption reform by ensuring the independence and effective functioning of key anti-corruption institutions. One precondition for other reforms to work in this country is an improved legal system that is able to effectively tackle corruption. Although recent legislation has been adopted, large-scale corruption remains largely unaddressed, with huge costs for the economy and society, assessed to be up to 10% of GDP annually. The loss of resources caused by corruption constitutes a substantial proportion of the resources of the state. Illicit financial flows in Ukraine are estimated to be approximately $10 billion per year. If Ukraine were to successfully seize and confiscate only 10% of this financial resource, approximately $1 billion, it would fund the construction of 212 large-scale secondary schools and 474 primary schools here in Ukraine. In this way, anti-corruption, which is rooted in SDG 16 and peace, justice, and effective institutions, is an important enabler of the 23 agenda. We are proud that the UN has supported Ukraine on the creation of the National Agency on Corruption Prevention, as well as supported the e-declaration system of public officials that today is recognized among the most efficient e-declaration systems globally. The UN Convention Against Corruption has provided an entry point for UN leadership on anti-corruption issues. We are therefore happy that this year, the National Agency on Corruption Prevention took part in the 2021 UNGA Special Session Against Corruption. In June of this year, the General Assembly adopted a political declaration against corruption, in which it underscored its commitment to effectively addressing challenges and implementing measures to prevent, combat corruption, and strengthen international cooperation. It calls on states to take measures to prevent corruption involving the private sector. The UN therefore encourages ethical behavior, anti-corruption and anti-bribery compliance efforts, integrity, accountability, and transparency measures in all enterprises. Along with business, we have CSOs and the media, and they too are key in identifying and detecting and reporting on cases of corruption. I'd also like to mention the positive role of international investment. Foreign direct investment in minimizing opportunities for all acts of corruption. This is extremely important for Ukraine, as the National Economic Strategy for 2030 puts investment in its core. Now, acknowledging the disproportionate impact on women and vulnerable population requires addressing the interlinkages between corruption and gender. Gender equality has proven to be essential in our efforts to prevent corruption. Women can also play a critical role as agents of change, particularly to address corruption in the education and health sectors. Another important measure could be to develop a comprehensive statistical framework to measure corruption, its impact, and inform evidence-based anti-corruption policies. The Ukrainian anti-corruption strategy which is being discussed now in the Rada, is a key milestone for effective planning and implementation of systemic anti-corruption measures. I'd also like to recall that it is important to work at the municipal level to reduce corruption, as decentralization gradually gives more power and funds to hromadas. Finally, there is an important role of digitization in tackling corruption. Just 2 weeks ago, the Rada adopted the law on administrative procedure that regulates interaction between citizens and businesses with public authorities. This is a key step in anti-corruption policy. Now, to conclude, we know that structural and governance reforms are the preconditions for other transformations to take place here in Ukraine. At the same time, they do take significant time to materialize, and any reform reversal that we often witness in other countries will have significant economic and social costs. As the UN embarks on developing its new cooperation framework with Ukraine, issues of rule of law, good governance, and anti-corruption will definitely be a central element of our cooperation with Ukraine, as efforts against corruption contribute to achieving the 2030 agenda. Once again, on behalf of the resident coordinator and the UN system broadly, I would like to thank you very much, the organizers, for having us here, and I look very much forward to this interesting event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for your constant support. І зараз я хочу наголосити.
And now I would like to underline that we have another partner, Ukraine Reform Conference, that supports the changes that we currently having in Ukraine in 2021-2022. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Nicole Ruder, the Director on Cooperation at the Switzerland Embassy in Ukraine. So what's the Ukraine Reform Conference and what the businesses can do in order to promote those reforms in Ukraine?
And good morning to all participants, be you online or offline. Last week I was in Switzerland. I made a presentation and I did not mention COVID. I was extremely proud of myself. During the Q&A session, a very angry gentleman asked me if I was COVID blind. So today, this is not going to happen again. There are, in fact, quite a few parallels between corruption and COVID. They're both really bad news. We don't know which one is worse, but we surely know that they're both massively destructive for the economy, for society, and for our future. I think Dennis mentioned a number of the ways in which corruption damages the development of a country. They're also both highly infectious. And they're both very hard to get under control. But they're not only parallels. COVID and corruption are in many ways mutually reinforcing. They're two evils that are working hand in hand. Let me give you two examples. The first one, vaccine hesitancy in Ukraine is directly linked to a very deep distrust in the health system. The root of this distrust comes from corrupt practices. So the virus rejoices when people don't get vaccinated. The second example is COVID has disrupted a lot of business practices, good business practices. And the coping mechanisms, the improvisations that were needed to overcome the COVID restrictions have been ruthlessly attacked by corruption. So corruption loves the mayhem that COVID has caused in so many areas of life. So this is the bad news. They're mutually reinforcing, but at the same time, there's also positive parallels between COVID and corruption. First, there is an unprecedented global effort to combat both COVID and corruption. At the international level, at the global level, there is a push for more sustainable, post-fossil economy with governments, consumers, NGOs, investors asking for increased responsibility, increased transparency, accountability, and in particular of multinational enterprises. Second, for both, they are treatments, they are vaccines. Business integrity, responsible business conduct, and transparency are the booster shots of anti-corruption. Dennis again has made a number of examples, given a number of examples on how this is done. Third, businesses, the private sector actually truly understands the risks of corruption as they do the risks of COVID. Whereas business success can come and go, integrity failure and loss of trust is almost an unsurmountable challenge for a business. Once you've lost the trust of your consumers, you can just as well disappear. So this is why many successful multinational companies have now business integrity enshrined in their company values, establish business integrity codes, frameworks, participate in global and voluntary initiatives such as the Global Compact, which is also one of the reasons we are here today. And last but not least, another parallel between COVID and corruption is combating both is a collective effort. It is not the effort that has to be done by someone else. Each and every one of us has a role to play to contain COVID, and each and every one of us has a role to play to combat corruption. And Ukraine has clearly embarked on a difficult path towards eradicating corruption and towards compliance with relevant EU standards and norms, which are not just EU standard and norms, but are actually global norms. The government has an important role to play, but so do businesses, so does civil society, and so do individuals. Again, this is what brings us here today, business actively taking a role, taking the responsibility to help and contribute to the eradication of corruption. And for that, I would like to congratulate the Global Compact Network in Ukraine, but also all participants and all individuals who are sitting here, because it truly is a collective effort. Now, at the beginning I mentioned that I'm not allowed to make a speech without mentioning COVID. There's another topic that I'm not allowed to make a speech of without mentioning it, and that is the Ukraine Reform Conference 2022. So Switzerland will be co-hosting the Ukraine Reform Conference 2022 in Lugano on the 4th and the 5th of July. And our approach is twofold. On one hand, we have the time until the conference itself that we want to use to create momentum and energy to get things done in the priority areas that we will be discussing at the conference. And justice, rule of law, and anti-corruption is one of the very important priorities for the conference itself. And we want to use the momentum that gets us there to help as many initiatives along the way and to create the energy that is needed to move things forward. This is why today's event is an associated event to the Ukraine Reform Conference. You have the little logo up there. And businesses are key stakeholders when we look at the way we see the conference shaping up. It's not a conference that's just about government. It requires all stakeholders to contribute to reforms, as it takes all stakeholders to eradicate corruption. And with that, thank you very much again. I will hand back over to our organizer. Thank you.
Таким чином, у нас у всіх
In this way, all of us have a possibility to get joining to Ukrainian conference, which will be held in Lugano. It's just the first event in our partnership, but we are hopeful of holding them onwards. And in our plans, it is also to prepare an international forum in Davos, where we will have an opportunity to unite and combine on the same platform both Ukrainian and Swiss businesses, as well as connect them to some of the representatives of authorities in order to once again talk about the necessity for Ukraine to develop further. Afterwards, on the 5th of April, we are planning in Ukraine United Business Life Europe, which is a huge event taking place once again within the framework of the Global Compact. Usually it is hosted in several countries of the world, 3 conferences running throughout the world, and we have won the right to hold this conference in 2022 in Kiev. All local networks, together with their representatives, will come to Kiev in order to raise the issue of the Green Deal and what European countries are able to do and European businesses are able to do to promote this issue. And Lugano, in which we can also participate. So we are inviting all of our businesses to join us so that we can contribute in a value and benefit for our country. And towards this end, we are joining even more, uniting our efforts. Today we are continuing to sign the Memorandum on collective efforts and action. Now we have quite a few new companies that would like to connect and to be involved in this initiative, and I'm inviting Daria Ruban, our associate, who will be telling you some of the announcements concerning the companies that will be joining this initiative, and then we will move on to signing this memorandum together with our companies. Dear guests, for signing on the Memorandum on Joint Actions Against Corruption in Ukraine, we are inviting the company called Active Participation in Society Life. Victoria Godik, you're invited. Would you kindly sign? To sign the memorandum, we are inviting CEO Tiberio from the Basf company, CEO of this company. We are inviting the legal manager on compliance and support of administrative functions, Karlsberg, Ukraine. Maria Chernevska is the representative to do that. We are inviting Chief Executive Officer from Dtac Control, Andriy Lagutenko, to sign the memorandum. Dear guests, by the way, if you are willing to make several theses or remarks because of signing this memorandum, you're welcome. Chief Executive Officer of Nestle, Alessandro Zanelli, is invited to sign the memorandum. We are inviting the General Manager of Parimatch, Natalia Hilevich, to sign the memorandum. We are inviting the head of the civil organization, Transparent Democracy, Olha Chernavol, to sign the memorandum. We are inviting the Chief Executive Officer of Data Group, Mihailo Shalemba, to sign. Dear colleagues, I would like to make a couple of statements. When we initiated compliance in 2017 in our company, for the majority of organizations, this was an extra bureaucratic procedure. At least this was their treatment. A lot of them, they believed that this was just an extra burden. Perhaps it was necessary to look good in their reports, but only last year, when we signed the agreement on merging with Vola company, the company which is 1.5 times larger than our company in all of the factors. And we managed to fund this agreement because of the loan issued by the EBRD. Then the whole company came to realize the role that compliance has to play. That without compliance procedures, it's impossible to make new big breakthrough movements in order to go into international arena. So I'm very happy today to join in the signing of this memorandum, of this agreement and compact, and I wish for as many companies in Ukraine to make such steps as it's possible. Thank you. We are inviting the representative of Medinvest Company, Elina Chuchuna, to sign. Good morning, dear colleagues. I am fully supportive of what has just been said, because Metinvest Company has been a member of Global Compact for quite some time, and this year we are joining the Anti-Corruption Initiative. And I believe that the skills, the basic knowledge, and the processes that large companies have to enjoy are extremely useful for SMEs. When we began to implement it in our company, we saw a lot of resistance, not amongst our employees, but amongst the representatives of small and medium-sized businesses who are our counter-agents. They did not understand why we required greater amount of information on the transparency of different processes than it was required in the legislation. And now, over some years, we can see the business climate in Ukraine changing. So we believe that this initiative will enable small-sized businesses to become more attractive in terms of involving investments in order to become providers and suppliers of different goods to other companies. And they will definitely be able to get greater funding and develop their businesses more in this regard. Thank you very much. To sign the memorandum, we are inviting the head of board, Stefano Burani, Pravex Bank. Дуже дякую. To sign the memorandum, we are inviting the director of OSA Center, Pavlo Verkhnyansky. Greetings, colleagues. Regardless of the fact that our company helps businesses to become more transparent and more compliant with the help of money, I can still say for sure that compliance will become effective only when there are real actions undertaken. And if these are joint and collective actions, then corruption will definitely stand no chances. To sign the memorandum, we are inviting the partner and the head of forensic at KPMG, Olena Makarenko. We're also inviting the representative of Kyivstar Company, Sergei Kornilov, to sign. Unfortunately, the director on compliance and ethics, Tatiana Kirik, was to be in my shoes in this place, but due to some circumstances, she wasn't able to come here today. However, we will be signing this agreement remotely with the help of digital signature, because we promote various new technologies. And on my behalf, I would like to say about what compliance community is going through in Ukraine. That compliance area and anti-corruption, anti-bribery is getting more interesting and attractive, not only for the businesses, but for the society in general. Thank you very much for your efforts for that. Dear friends, thank you very much indeed. We have nearly doubled the number of countries that have already joined in the signing of this memorandum. I've just been observing all of your signing. You're so different. All of your signatures are so varied. And I believe that this diversity and variety will enable us to see this issue from different perspectives. And each of you will be able to contribute something new, but at the same time something unique for us to really be promoted to the next level. I thank all of those that have signed. And now we are moving on to the next part of our program, of our agenda. We're going to have a brief discussion on how international experience allows us to overcome corruption, different prospects for Ukraine. I'm inviting here Andriy Borovik, who is the CEO of Transparency International in Ukraine. The floor is yours. So this is going to be monological rather than a discussion, as I was hoping for. Well, in fact, I was thinking about what to say. However, probably I will be saying very evident things, that Ukraine is a country of contrasts, because on the one hand, without international partners, in Ukraine very few reforms could become reality. And we have today, because first of all, our country works with top corruption. We are here and we are operational. On the other hand, once every 5 to 7 years, we cannot even elect the managers for these bodies, but which is really disgraceful and embarrassing, because for the 5th or the 15th or the 16th body, we have been selecting and trying to elect the head of the Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office. On the other hand, we can also be trendsetters in terms of promoting international experience, because in many cases Ukraine is very much advanced in digital solutions, and we have already exported a lot of solutions such as Prozoro, and I'm hopeful that a lot of that is already functional over the world. And in Moldova in particular, they have adapted this tool to their legislation. We have massive open data which journalists, representatives of civil society organizations and other businesses utilize in their platforms. But this is what's happening here. But for example, in Armenia, what they're doing, they're just beginning to open this data, and there are very few people who know how to work with this data and how to process it. Or Moldova, another illustration for your notice, the decision was taken that next year they will develop or borrow some solutions from other countries in order to introduce privatization and to sell property. And in Ukraine, we have this platform, Prozoro, which is internationally recognized. Therefore, on the one hand, international assistance is always handy and relevant. On the other hand, we can teach ourselves. On the one hand, we have fantastic IT specialists, and if artificial intelligence could select its own leadership, probably it would be able to do it much faster and avoiding making a lot of mistakes. However, every 5 to 6 years, we enter various political discussions and just waste time. And instead of having and hitting titles that Ukraine is so innovative, instead we can see lots of titles that we are bogged down by warfare and corruption. And this corruption is really high level, because grassroots decisions such as DIA, passport on your telephone, certificate, even the COVID certificates. I saw our counterparts in Europe, they also have their electronic applications. They usually say, I'll show it to you. And it usually takes them about 5 minutes to upload these kinds of applications. So we would like to, of course, witness many more good things, but for that both business and civil organizations and the state have to work jointly. On our part, where we can, we always offer solutions and support and stand by. Definitely encourage everyone to stand firmly, and we understand something worse can happen, but we still have to anticipate something good to happen. Thank you. Thank you, Andriy. To follow up on the point of international experience, we have Antonina Prudko, the chief of the Secretariat Office from the company Unique. Antonina, you're welcome. Well, this is really a challenge to speak independently, because both Andriy and I were hoping to sit down, as traditionally it happens, to talk. My name is Antonina Prudko. I'm a representative of the Ukrainian network of compliance and integrity. And here, in terms of the global anti-corruption initiative, we are partners, because we were established back in 2017, and this grassroots initiative instigated by businesses, the Office of Business Ombudsman and the European Business and Reconstruction and Development, and OSCE, encouraged us to work together, and it's a great pleasure for me to see a lot of our participants and to see this idea of collective initiative, that it is functional and operational. We are one of the targets. For one, this network was created because we wanted to expand this culture of integrity to Ukrainian businesses. And when talking about international experience, I should say that at first we had a great number of international companies working in Ukraine as our members. This was natural because their culture had embraced it. Their headquarters were already elaborating these policies. And back then in 2017 and 2018, joining and active participation of international companies was really beneficial. Why? Because they were ready to share, and they're still ready to share it with Ukrainian business. And basically this is its value, because when there is something practical, something that can be demonstrated as success stories, and when big international business demonstrates that it's working, that it speaks about future, it's the language that the whole world speaks, and it contributes to development and trust, investments are coming, then all I can say is that within these last 4 years, this dialogue and conversation about the necessity of compliance, that it must become an integral part of every business, has really expanded in its scope. And Ukrainian companies begin to come to us themselves, in particular to us, and they begin to ask us, how can we build our compliance programs? How can we assess our corruption risks? How can we delineate between the functionality of compliance officers and anti-corruption commissioners? So it's not only private businesses, but state-owned businesses that come to us as well, because it's actively incorporating now, and now they're posing multiple questions for us to answer. Something that I would like to underscore is that in our work, in the work of our network, what we value most is international practices and standards that we can apply here in Ukraine. However, I would like to be supportive of what Andriy, the previous speaker, had to say, that Ukrainian business and Ukrainians as such are learning fast. And they can also offer a lot in return in terms of, or in the form of different innovations. And something that we can basically share is that compliance community is actively joining its efforts, and it's ready to produce and replicate various practices. It's ready to share its experience with those that need it. In particular, we have established a compliance officer club that joins officers in compliance from state-owned companies, and they're really charged, and they really want to train and study, and they really want to very quickly cover the way that private businesses have been covering for years, because they're fully aware of the fact that big, large-size state-owned companies have no other have no other option but to embrace all of these cases and policies. They need to be implemented at the basis of their institutions. And if I may share one success story, this is Ukrenergo, an energy company in Ukraine. We started our collaboration with them 2 years ago. And back then, a compliance officer went to them and they had to start from scratch. Whereas now, they are not only active participants of UNIC, this compliance and integrity network. They instigate a lot of initiatives themselves, but we have jointly developed a plan that can also help them develop them to become more transparent, develop their compliance procedures, and in 2 years we have fulfilled this plan. So now they're going through our local assessment, both external and self-evaluation, and they're ready to become active participants. So based on our preliminary observations, we may state that they will become full-fledged members, and their compliance programs sometimes are even better and more efficient than some private businesses have, who we are also closely watching. One more point to make: collective actions, joint efforts, when we unite around such a phenomenon as counteracting corruption, where one company will definitely have a lot of trouble to go through all of the aspects. Collective resistance and collective tackling these problems result in the fact, and we can see a lot of examples of that, when these collective actions promote us to move on further and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Antonina. Indeed, UNIC has a significant expertise in the field of anti-corruption, and while joining our program, of course, we could not but to have a meeting with them, but to have cooperation with them. And we thought, how can we combine our efforts and produce an ecosystem of non-recognition of corruption? And Antonina has programs for the development of SMEs and for assisting the large businesses with developing their programs, but there's not enough demand among the SMEs. And therefore, we have started with understanding that we would need to produce this demand. We would need to work with large audience to engage a significant number of companies willing to cooperate in this area. And therefore, we support one another. We maintain constant communications. We think of how to promote this topic together. And now just a bit of interactive actions, since we do have the CEOs of different companies. We would like to listen to you, and I'd like to introduce Antonio Gatler and to give him a floor. He's the head of the UN Global Compact Network in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and Switzerland and Ukraine are considered as the countries with largest developing local network. Ukraine in Eastern Europe, Switzerland in Western Europe. So we've decided to combine our efforts and to see how can we impact the further development of our local networks. That's why Antonio is together with us. Last week, he joined us with the Partnership for Sustainability Award activity, and since he's here in Ukraine, he would help us to engage all of you in the discussions on how we can add to those activities that we are currently conducting.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I will try to do it a little bit interactive. So I invite you that we may also speak together, not only me. Normally I like the way the World Economic Forum is putting people in two circles and you face each other and you have to see and speak to each other. I've seen now, coming from Switzerland, I will give you the Swiss perspective. I have, to be honest, no clue of the Ukrainian perspective, even if we are collaborating for 3-4 years now. but every time I'm here, I learn a lot of new things. I would just start with putting the context. This definition is not mine, it's the definition on corruption of Transparency International, based on Transparency International SME Guide. Corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. This is the case when a person grants or even promises another person unjustified advantage, whether in relation to a specific service in return, bribery, or merely in relation to the performance of his or her office, granting of an advantage. And here I give you the Swiss context, I have no other one. In Switzerland, corruption is also prohibited not only among companies or state entities, but also among private persons, and is punishable for all parties involved. That means not only for the persons acting corruptly, but also for the company involved itself. So that means we have quite a long tradition of anti-corruption. And for us, I was working in government, I was working in the public sector, I was working for NGOs, and now with the Young Global Compact. Corruption is somehow a no-go culturally. And I know here the situation is different. And I'm not really sure whether my contribution is relevant for your context. So you will tell me how you see that, because the purpose of this process is that we learn from each other. And if we have Nestle and other large companies, Heineken, who are working internationally, that can be a huge opportunity. And what I would like to really propose to us, also with the UN, the Swiss Embassy and others, international actors, if we can jointly promote the rule of law, we will contribute enormously to the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, as Dennis has said it. Can I have the next slide? I would just to put for us as businesses, as we as UN Global Compact see the connects between the anti-corruption, responsible business conduct and the Agenda 2030 with the SDGs and our responsibility as private sector. Can you go on? Just once? Yes. So what you are all Young Global Compact participants or signatories. So you have subscribed to the 10 principles, and the 10th one is this anti-corruption. So we expect from you that you implement step by step an anti-corruption policies along your whole value chain, not only in compliance. Because what I'm observing, especially larger companies delegate the whole corruption thing at the beginning to the compliance. That's the legal department, they're responsible of. But you're nodding, that's exactly what I want. No, it's part of the whole philosophy of a company. If it's not in the DNA of a company, we will fail. It will not work. And that's probably here the biggest challenge I see, because you have a context where it's not normal to be clearly anti-corruption and follow the rules we have agreed on. So for us it's important that this goes step by step into the DNA. And I would be looking forward also in this collective action process we are starting together, because also in Switzerland we have with the Basel Institute on Governance, which is one of the leading institutes in Europe on the anti-corruption topic, we try to put up support for our participants, for our companies, and look what we can contribute to really help not only the Ukraine, but the regional and global economy to be a contributor to the rule of law and to a better world for everybody. And with that I come to the other aspect. Can you go on? Yes. If we are speaking of responsible business conduct, we mean it's not about only the operational things, it's about the whole value creation, from procurement to producing services and goods, and then to the end of life of the good. And one of the biggest challenge, is the circle economy aspect, that we get zero net positive in greenhouse gas emissions, that we really observe the human rights due diligence along the whole value chain. That these are big challenges, especially for large companies, but also for small ones. And the anti-corruption, Dennis has said it, Nicole too, I mean, if we have a corrupt context, it will be very difficult to really implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we are trying to do is really to think anti-corruption as one of the bases. Because the principles of our market economy, you know that better than me, is I have to trust my business partner. If I can trust him, but pacta sunt servanda, we have learned in law, contracts have to be respected. And if you can't trust your business partner, I mean, it's really getting very difficult. I have worked in Africa and I know what it means. It's if you have always to suspect the other one that he's not really following the rules, it is difficult. And I'm really happy to have big companies here engaging and say, we take that serious. I mean, Nestle sits in my board, Nestle's headquarter, and we do also with other big companies lots of things. But the biggest challenge in my eyes, and I would like to hear from you is afterwards, is how do we get the middle-sized and smaller companies, and here in this context probably the state-owned companies, into these processes? And what can we help and what can we do together to improve that? Can you give me the next one? So, yeah, just go on, please, that I have the full one. I won't be going into the details, you know that. I mean, the triple bottom line must be the basis of our business attitude. Economic success is basic. If we do not have a profit, we can't be sustainable. But we need also to really see the planet, so the ecological context and the social context, human rights due diligence, international labor norms, etc. And I'm adding to this triple bottom line the governance aspect, and it's oftentimes forgotten. We have it in ESG, so in the investment, and if the governance is not working, just forget about the other things. That's what I want to see, and that's what you were saying. It's this context we have to create. As businesses, we have to see the whole picture and break it down to procurement, to processing, so production, and services, and then distribution, marketing, finance, etc. So if we are able to develop a philosophy in our companies who are always thinking the whole thing together, we will really contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah, I stop here. I have then some examples how to proceed, but I have seen most of you are compliance officers or working also in compliance and CEOs, you know that. Because Transparency International has prepared a small guide for SMEs with some 25 questions. They just can go through it and then get a feedback. But like Antonio was saying, I think these instruments already exist, but we may exchange afterwards whether we can collaborate and look where are the best topics. And what Andreas, his name, was saying, that the technical things you have here in Ukraine could be even very interesting for us in Central Europe, because we are oftentimes not that advanced in IT applications. But I would like now to open up. How much time do we have? Some 20 minutes. So if you could say what is for you the biggest challenge, and we are here on the Chatham House rules, so don't use what is said, but can you just start to share a little bit among us what is the biggest challenge you're facing, and where do you see possibilities where we could collaborate to bring these topics ahead together? Who is breaking the ice? Can I give you the...
Well, I think I think the main point here, talking about Ukraine, is how much are international investors available to invest in a country that is doing or not doing enough to fight corruption. So the real point is that we are all aware here in Ukraine, we are we really want to attract investments. These are crucially important for the development of this country. And then, of course, is the ABC, is the base. Nobody will want to invest in a country that is not taking seriously the issue of corruption. And this is a wide concept. So take, for instance, the judicial system, the bureaucracy. Everything has to be reformed. Now, what is your point on this? So you think that you can still invest in countries that are not taking seriously the corruption issue, or you say it's the contrary?
No, I mean here I can give. I don't know where the banks are here and investors. You're a bank, so you know the business. I mean, I have seen a huge,
quite a lot.
Yeah, we have seen a huge shift in sustainable investment in the last 4 years. So investments into sustainable funds, companies, etc., has tripled within 3 years. So it's really a curve like this, because when I started in 2016 in this position, there were some 6 or 7% of all assets in Switzerland were in sustainable investments. Today it's over 35% within 3 years. And this tendency will go on. And it's clear more and more investors are asking even small and smallest companies, do you have a compliance system? What is your human rights due diligence policy? What is your procurement policy? How do you handle all your value chain concerning greenhouse gas emissions, waste treatment, and circular economy will come. And what we observe is a tendency in reporting. Up to now, publicly rated companies in Switzerland, in Europe, they normally had only to publish their financial results. And now more and more the request from the investment side comes, we want to know what is your balance in ecological and social concerns. We do not have yet the system, but it's going this direction. There, the anti-corruption is crucial, it's the core. Governance is the core. It's a no-go in Switzerland that, let's take the example of Nestle. You have seen that. I mean, the president of the board was also the CEO. And that's now 6 years ago, I think. The pressure became so big from Ethos, one of the foundations, so that they had to split that. So really they split the governance, the board, and the management board are some kind of independent and control each other. So these processes will go on. And the regulation I'm observing in Europe goes clearly in this direction. It will be more severe. And we have already several regulations in the UK, Anti-Slavery Act, we have many legislations, the compliance officer know that much better than me, who force companies who want to export to Europe or the US to follow these rules. So it's also in the self-interest of the local economy here to really try to improve that. You want?
Yeah, maybe I pick it up. You mentioned Nestle a couple of times, so being the CEO of
I know
Nestle,
that very well because they're sitting in our board.
So I really like the discussion that is going so far, because on one side we create a parallel between, and Nicole was doing that, between COVID and compliance and how contagious that can be. At the same time, you are putting clearly the point on why compliance matters. And this, for me, is a critical point in an environment where compliance is not top of the agenda, to communicate and establish with all my employees and all the business partners why it matters. And you create clearly the parallel, because first of all, we need to be true to the values and the purpose of the company. But second, because it puts in danger the future of our business,
It put in danger the future of ourselves as employees within our company. And fundamentally because it creates the environment where if we are not compliant, therefore we have to deal with non-compliant business partners. And raising the point on why is critical. Why it matters. What does it mean, compliance? It means do the right things in the right way every time, for the right reasons. But it's not so simple. So elevating this question is critical. Nestle has been here for 26 years. We have been investing. We will continue to invest. We have a lot of installments. So despite, as you're saying, the environment, clearly we know how to deal with the environment. And one thing, I would like also to be a little bit more positive. I think there is a lot of evolution in this direction in Ukraine. We have an environment which is growing and an environment where basically we can do business in the right way. But one thing we need to be clear, we should not keep compliance and everything what we are talking about for granted. Something which we have always to control. By the way, we will be speaking later in the panel, so we will further, let's say, talk about these items.
Perfect, thank you very much. I think that's a very good point because I also observe only it's now 4 years that I was here first time, and up to now there is a move. There is things are moving. And also to say, in my Swiss context, this connects between value creation, profit, social responsibility, ecological profit, and good governance wasn't that evident 5-6 years ago. For SMEs and middle-sized, Roche, Novartis, Nestle, ABB, they were the forerunners. They were oftentimes also criticized for several reasons, but they have realized already 15-20 years ago we have to go in this direction. And my biggest challenge, and it's also for you like this, we have to get these SMEs in the supply chains in that system. And there I see still the big challenge, but there is big progress. That's my observation, at least in my context.
Okay, I'll make it very briefly. And again, I will be also in the panel. I'll talk about our company later on. Yeah, I'm from BSF.
That's awesome.
We put compliance and at very high standard inside the company and take it very seriously. We will never pursue a business opportunity if we have to deal with corruption. We'll give it up instantly. Yeah, so this is a very strong statement. Yeah, we are ready to lose business rather than that. But I don't want to talk about this now. You mentioned before about the overall culture of compliance in Ukraine, and I think it's relevant for everybody. And I would like, let me turn like this. I would like to speak from a perspective of an Eastern European. Maybe you know I was born and raised in Romania, a neighboring country of Ukraine, which 20 years ago had a even more dramatic problem with corruption than we have today in Ukraine on a global level, general, on all dimensions, high level, low level, and so on. Now, there is a very thin border between corruption and tradition. Yeah, being Eastern Europeans, we are very warm people. We like to, make ourselves happy. Yeah, so we like to give gifts and receive gifts, and there is a very thin borderline there. Yeah, this is one thing. The other thing, there is a certain tradition and culture which we still see it in Ukraine among business partners. Something which is called, if it was good for me, it should be good for you as well. So if this year was good, I might be willing to return you something. Even you are working for a multinational company. Yeah, so this is also something to watch out. How can this be solved? It's a long way, but it's possible, and that's why I want to give you a reason for optimism. Look at Romania today. Are we 100%? Are we like Switzerland? No, we are very far away. But we have made a tremendous progress. And all we needed was a strong institution, which was the National Agency of Anti-Corruption. It's called DNA here in Romania. And a hero, which was the head of this institution. Maybe you heard the name, Laura Codruța Kovac, which today is the chief prosecutor of European Union. Yeah? This is what it takes. Strong institutions, and you need a hero as well. So this is what Ukraine needs as well, I think. And then we will make progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Someone else, you tell me when we have to stop.
May I intervene, please? I just would like to mention that there is impossible to separate business from government and from the country, because country should take responsibility for anti-corruption culture in its country. And this is what we try to do with our government. Usually the Prime Minister, the Vice Prime Minister on European integration supports our event, and we are grateful for that to them. But today we invited each and every person from the government to join this initiative. But you see, nobody from government here. It means that there is even more. What should we do together to push our government to work with us and create this anti-corruption ecosystem in our country?
I just wanted to point out one thing. First colleague and Tatiana just now mentioned investing into a country, and they mentioned the environment. Obviously, it's important to understand the environment. It's important to understand the country risk, but it's only one of the factors of actual risk in terms of operating in a certain country. If you look at the most successful companies in Ukraine, international companies, some of them are represented here actually, you would see that most of them are pretty transparent businesses, and they don't face significant problems. The ones that are actually facing problems are probably exceptions in this country. So it's not always the problem of a certain environment. Sometimes businesses use these, yes, obviously existing problems as excuses. You know, if you look at the most successful Ukrainian companies, purely Ukrainian, I mean, and I'm not talking about successful businesses related to PEPs or, you know, certain oligarchic businesses. I don't count them. They would also be more or less or purely transparent businesses. And they don't look around at the risky environment and incompliant environment, as we all say here. More or less, when a foreign investor comes into a country, obviously they invest into a country, but more importantly, they invest into a certain enterprise. If it's a brownfield investment, right? They purchase someone. They need to understand the risk behind it, obviously, the connections, the ecosystem, the business model, but they invest into an enterprise and they bring their own culture. The more foreign businesses operate here in this country, I guess the better the compliance culture is. And again, Nestle just mentioned they're here for 26 years or so, right? I believe they faced certain problems throughout these 26 years, but they exist here and they develop here. Other companies as well. I see Carlsberg here, Carlsberg representative, obviously, Maria here. They're also purchasing. They've been purchasing local businesses, local breweries, and with their own risks. But they've built up their culture inside those enterprises, which obviously extrapolated to the ecosystem of their own business, to their suppliers, to their buyers, whatever, distributors, whoever. So it's mostly an excuse, I guess. Well, there are problems, but if you build up your own culture inside and you don't surrender to those risks or to those problems, you build a successful business. So it's not always the country risk.
Thank you very much. I strongly would suggest also now in the collective action process, and it's this week where several compliance officers will gather really to discuss what is the way forward, because you were mentioning the suppliers are probably core, and you as big companies have a big influence to kindly ask, or even impose certain rules as investors do. And I think there is a big leverage, and what you were just saying is for me evident. We see that also. I take the other example of ecological sustainability and human rights due diligence in supply chains. In Switzerland, I have still companies that, well, we are not complicit in human rights abuse in Switzerland. How could we? And then I ask them, and do you know how your semi-products, your metals you're using, your aluminium you're treating, etc., how that is produced and under what conditions? And it's exactly the same thing here. So if we can gather knowledge best practices, reach out, sensibilize. I think that is also the purpose of the UN Global Compact and Transparency International and the other NGO, I forgot the name, local. So to really create these ecosystems to contribute to this Agenda 2030 and to responsible business conduct, which makes a difference. And that's also why we as local networks, we want to collaborate. We can leverage knowledge and transfer it, and that's also why we are so much engaged in the Ukrainian Reform Conference, now also with Switzerland, but also with the UN, to try really to bring these agendas forward.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you.
We have to stop, huh?
Yes,
So,
unfortunately.
good continuation.
We have some time for coffee break. We can continue there, but we should to start strictly at 12:30 with our next panel discussion. So you're welcome to continue. Oh, sorry. And we need a photo with those who signed the document. I invite here to make the joint photo for our memories.
Karenka, who is the head of forensics section of KPMG company in Ukraine, to moderate our next platform. Colleagues, good afternoon. I hope that everyone is back from the break, at least those who were willing to. Now I'm approaching everyone who's listening to us online. In the first place, I'm very happy to be part of this significant anti-corruption week, which is being held by UN Global Compact Network Ukraine, and it's an honor for me to be a moderator in the International Standard Compliance Anti-Corruption Requirements in Business platform and panel. My name is Natalia Makarenko from KPMG. I'm not going to take up much of your time. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists today. We have a fantastic group, and it's a great honor to moderate the conversation with them. So let us get started. And I'm inviting Vitaly Vereshchagin, Chief Executive Officer of Caparol Ukraine. Caparol Ukraine is part of Deutsche International Company, I believe you are working, which numbers 125 years of its history. It takes care of beauty, environment, human environment, by way of importing and exporting high-quality solutions for facade-facing, various kinds of surfacing materials and technologies for heat insulation for buildings. I tried to say everything correctly. Was I right? Yes, it was all correct. Thank you. Our next panelist today is Alessandro Zanelli, Chief Executive Officer of Nestle in Ukraine and Moldova. It's the largest company in Ukraine in food production and beverage manufacture, which is represented in 186 countries, and it operates a portfolio of world-famous companies. And it's a leader working with Torch and Mivida in Ukraine. It started its operations in Ukraine in 1994. Now there are 3 manufacturing facilities in Kharkiv, Lviv, and Lviv, and elsewhere in Ukraine. They have a laboratory, 2 distribution centers. In Ukraine, they have about 6,000 employees working on achieving the common goal of Nestle to expand the value of Nestle life and to contribute to the future of our next generation. Our next speaker is Mr. Tiberio Dima, CEO of BASF, German company that creates chemical products for the future, combining economic achievements with social responsibility. The company was established in Ukraine in 1992, supporting the development of businesses of its clients, and is active in all fields of industry and provides access to the market for different innovative solutions and products. And last but not least, we have Stefano Brani, who is also head of the board of Pravex Banks, which is part of the Intesa San Paolo group. And they have been providing services to their customers for more than 25 years. It works across the whole board of Ukraine and provides various services to retail and wholesale and corporate clients. Dear panelists, I'm very happy to welcome you all today. Our discussion will be today dedicated to main elements of compliance programs of Ukrainian companies, which are part of international companies. We'll be speaking about competitive advantages of business because of the compliance policy implementation. Once again, without much further ado, I would like to kick it off and say that we have already nearly launched into this discussion because you, as the panelists, were engaged in a previous discussion, and for that I would like to thank our previous speaker. But now I would like to ask my question and address it to the Chief Executive Officer of BASF in Ukraine. How do you assess the level of compliance in Ukraine? How long will it take Ukraine, how many years, in order to achieve the level of compliance of Western countries?
I think this question will deserve a longer answer, but I will not do it because we don't have time today and we have to, it depends at which level you look. We discussed earlier, you have overall a very strong culture here and tradition, of respecting each other, of being kind to each other, and that there is a very, very thin borderline between that and corruption. And that can be, just to give you an example to make it more palpable, let's say New Year's is coming, and gifts to customers or gifts to authorities, some companies used to take. Now, The value of this gift, you know, is very difficult to define what is the borderline. But this is how you can fall into the trap of being corrupted. Yeah. So this will take years to change. It might take another generation to change this culture, yeah, and to come to the levels that we see in Western Europe. Then, when we talk about big business, I think there is not too much difference. I think I'm convinced all multinational companies, they are having the same standard of compliance. At least I speak in my name, but I'm sure all multinational companies have the same standards of compliance as globally, yeah. Very clear, not negotiable, without any room for interpretation. Yeah, very clear rules where we do not tolerate any act of corruption. Is it now? And now we have between the whole population and the big business, we have the small and medium companies. And the key question here is how easy it is for these companies to act in an environment like Ukraine and to be competitive in a country like Ukraine, in the same time keeping very strong standards of compliance and anti-corruption. And this is, again, a very complex question which has a lot of answers. What I would say, I think, institutions like United Nations Global Compacts, big companies like the ones which are presented here, we can act as role models. And at least the least we can do, beyond setting very clear boundaries for ourselves and the way we operate in the market, choosing our suppliers, choosing our customers as well, we can also serve as an inspiration, as a role model for the small and medium companies. Yeah. And I don't know if you ask me, what is the next question?
Yeah, the next question was about what do you think? How many time we need here in Ukraine to change, for the changes, to achieve like the same level as the Europe has?
It's, yeah, we can only guesstimate. It's a million-dollar question. Yeah, the best answer I can give. The best answer I can give, I can say that my home country transformed in about 10 years, having a strong institution and a hero at the two prerequisites. Yeah, institution which was given the power to act, yeah, and the frame to act, and a hero to lead this institution. So it took about 10 years, yeah, of sending politicians to jail and, you know, cleaning the big corruption in the country. Yeah, so it's not short time. You will not solve this issue in 1 year.
Yeah, дякую. Зрозуміло, що
Thank you. Thank you. It's clear that 1 year will definitely not be enough because we need to find our hero. So we will first have to start with looking for a hero, and then we begin the countdown of 10 years for us to move on along this pathway. Thank you for your answer. Our next question I would like to address to Mr. Alessandro Zanelli, Chief Executive Officer of Nestle in Ukraine and Moldova. Mr. Zanelli, you have a significant experience of working in Europe and now Ukraine and Moldova. Ukraine is considered in Europe to be a country with a low culture of compliance. How much harder is it for you sometimes to argue the necessity of making investments in Ukraine in your headquarters, chief headquarters?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And we said it already. We have been present here for 26 years with very good times, very good times, with different type of presidents, with different types of government. So resilience is here. Why? Well, fundamentally, let me start by saying that what guides Nestle in the world is Nestle Corporate Business Principles and the Nestle Code of Conduct. This is something that is our reference in every market where we operate. When we talk about compliance, I will enlarge a little bit the topic of what does it mean, compliance. But when we talk about compliance, compliance is a foundation of the business, together with quality, together with safety. What does it mean? It means that in absence of this foundation, we stop to operate. So as much as we stop to operate if we see that our sites are not safe or if the quality of our products is not good, we stop selling those products. So compliance has the same value. Then, having said this, it's obvious that we were mentioning a little bit before, the environment doesn't foster compliance. And therefore, yes, there are a number of elements that we need to reinforce when we talk to our management in VV to get CapEx, to get investments. But I give you a couple of examples. First of all, when we talk about compliance, and Antonio was mentioning very clearly before, let's not confuse compliance with corruption. It can be, it's one element, but it's compliance about how we work and how we treat our people. It's compliance in relation to the way we interact with the environment, and we take responsibility towards the future, towards the planet, towards the society. So with all this, we promote a number of different projects to the center, which are validated, which encourage, they are an encouragement for us to continue to do business in this way. That's very important. So we have sustainability targets, which are the same as the Nestle sustainability targets, and actually we are conducting them with the same speed also in Ukraine. Now, specifically, when the topic of today seems to be a little bit the anti-corruption, antitrust type of items, anti-bribery. It's, yes, let me give some clear examples here. Of course, we have a compliance officer. Of course, we have a compliance committee. And this is something that we need to communicate to small and medium enterprises on how to operate. But let's be clear. First of all, compliance is everyone's responsibility. It cannot be delegated. It's everyone's responsibility. Compliance officer, despite the name for in Nestle, doesn't have the rule to spot. Is not a policeman or policewoman in this case, because she's a woman. It doesn't have the role of spotting mistakes. Actually, the main role is to communicate about the values of the company and what is the reason why we need to operate in a compliant way. I was mentioning before when there was a question. Compliance starts with explaining to our employees why and what is the value. It's all about that. It's all about raising the awareness that it's about investing in our own future. It's investing in the company future. It's investing in the being proud of what we do and raising the level of trust. Because if we are uncompliant and we are open for briberies or stuff like that, it means that we have a counterpart which is also open for that. And therefore, we operate with this level. In a sense, we also try to communicate that, are you happy to tell to your kids or to your family that you are violating clearly some of the values? So establishing the value, creating the reason why, it's critical for us. We have all the control systems in place, and maybe we will touch base in a second question about what are the control systems. We have a compliance officer, we have the compliance committee, but in absence of control, there is one thing that binds us all together, which are our values. And we need to establish the values. Because in absence, we cannot control in every moment. But we need to know that in every moment, the business decision will be based on do the right things every time for the right reasons. And this is what we are trying to establish. So I took it a little bit longer just to tell that, yes, we need to make some efforts to convince Nestle to invest in Ukraine. But nevertheless, we are investing for 26 years. Every year we are investing more than 50 million to make our factories state-of-the-art factories. I want to give some pride to Ukraine and give some pride to Nestle in Ukraine, but to Ukraine as a nation. In Ukraine, we have the only factory that produces noodles for Europe and beyond Europe, which is in Kharkiv. So whatever noodles you buy, branded Maggi, Vignari, wherever, and of course Mirina, you need to know that it's produced in Kharkiv. In Lviv, we have Nestle history here is buying, also is acquisition of iconic brands like Svitoch, Mirina, and Torchin, and also international brands. Now we started to sell Starbucks, Nescafe, and we can go beyond that. Well, Svitoch factory, which we have in Lviv, is one of the key factories for wafers production. And this is, again, a decision of Nestle. And one thing I wanted to mention is our MBS, so Nestle Business Service, which is in Lviv. We have there 1,700 employees, which are providing services for all Europe. Average age is 29. People there are speaking more than 30 languages. I never managed to count these 30 languages because I reached 10 and then I don't know what other languages are there, but they speak more than 30 languages. So this is something that is in Ukraine. And we should take pride of that. So there is a way. There is for sure a way, and I want to give a clear sign of optimism in this direction. But it takes efforts, and as we were hearing before, time. It takes time. Thank you.
Тож дякую і, по-перше, дякую за цей inspiration.
Well, thank you for this inspiration about Ukraine. And I'd like to say that we are definitely proud of what products are produced in Ukraine, but representing my business community, I'd like to say that your center is something that everyone talks about. Everyone wants to learn how Nestle have achieved that level of success in Ukraine. And thank you for that. I'd like to move forward with another question to Vitaly Vereshchahin, the CEO of Capital in Ukraine. You are a representative of a company who could be considered as part of the SME, according to the international standards. So what are the major challenges for an international company with representative office in Ukraine in this category of small and medium enterprises? So what sort of challenges have you faced? Thank you for the question. Yes, looking at the size of our company in Ukraine, then we would consider ourselves medium enterprise. But we have an ambitious plans to foresee. So hopefully we'll change this paradigm and we'll start a new league after 3 or 4 years, and thanks to the work that we are doing. The market is not that big for the products that we offer. We are an international company. This is a family business, which is more than 125 years old. The owner of that business is the same family. That's a classical tradition in Germany. That's something like in other world for Ukrainians. Looking at the reputation for the company, it has an absolutely different notion. When your name is the name of the company and you're already the third or the fifth generation of owners of this company, then the issue of compliance and anti-corruption, this is absolutely not an issue for them to discuss. This is something that is inherent for them. But since we operate in a fairly young country with its own illnesses, we have to take this into account. What sort of challenges do we have? We need to understand the business. Business is all about people that cooperate or work with other people. It's either B2B or B2C. In any case, it's all about people. And for us, it's the challenges. Because we grew up in an environment that had an impact on us, that had become a part of our DNA. And for me, as the leader, the major task is to build another model to show that you can follow other paths to success. That if you have conducted something in the past, that was the past, really. And we want to play by the other rules in our company. And those rules starts with all of us. And I had a story of working with my team. Every top manager or a CEO is role model for others. We have to demonstrate something. But it's not enough simply to demonstrate. You need to talk, you need to communicate, you need to make sure that you have an impact on the mindset of each and everyone. You need to do something, of course, and you need to serve a PR manager for yourself. Like, look, we've done this way and it works, and you need to communicate that we shall continue. Walk to talk and talk to walk. And only in this case, you would be able to expect any challenges. And of course, we are not intending to change the whole country. We need to change the environment that we work with. And we are doing so, and we can be proud of ourselves and our achievements. We've done a lot for our industry. We're trying to change the rules. We're trying to participate in different associations and solve many interesting challenges because of that. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that lead by example topic, which is very important for compliance. And I think this is one of the fundamentals for the compliance, because if the employees and the personnel of the company, they're not believing that something is really working and the CEO is not demonstrating that, then how they can be responsible for those risks by themselves? That won't result in having them inherit that DNA. And I, of course, agree with Alessandro that everyone is responsible for the risks, because we sometimes have the situation like, okay, we have a compliance officer, so he'll be responsible for everything, and he'll be on guard, and now we'll be living another life simply because we have that compliance officer. No, everyone is responsible for making sure that risks would never happen. And I would like to have a few more questions for Stefano Burani. And this banking system and the banks, they are implementing the compliance system within themselves, but they're also an agents for implementing, or let's say the institutions that might promote the implementation of compliance within their own clients. So what is the practice and the strategy of the compliance in your institution? What sort of fundamentals of compliance do you have?
Actually, I would say modern companies have additional things other than just making money, which is still valid anyway. We are here to make money. But in doing this, we have to act more responsibly. So we have a number of additional things, such as to respect the needs or to have a relationship with a number of stakeholders. And this includes, of course, the clients, our employees, the society in general. So I would say a bank is it's a company, and in the end it's a very particular company, so we are sort of a different beast. In this, a bank is not only, and when we talk concept like compliance, corruption, have in mind that for a bank is the job it's much more complicated than that for an industrial or a commercial company, because we are a regulated entity, and so we need first of all to respect what are the local laws and the international laws. We are, in any case, moreover, an international bank. And of course, our shareholders, he's a sort of maniac on us as local entity in Ukraine, complying with the set of rules that are set for the entire group. We work in a good number of countries, and of course, they want to be sure that here we are doing the right things. Now. I would say, in general, compliance is the concept of compliance and fighting corruption is somehow evolving. I strongly believe that you do not. I mean, in the old days, you had certain set of rules, you had the legislation, and you comply with rules. Because the legislation says so, full stop. Okay? Now, the modern concept is different. So in our group, we think that we need to approach the things in a different way. You really need to have a compliance culture within the company. And for a bank, this is much more important. Imagine that we do not have just to fight corruption, so keep an eye open on corruption, but in our case, compliance strictly monitors what we do with clients under the anti-money laundering, the financial crime. So you can imagine how delicate is the issue when it comes to translate this to a bank. How we do? We do through, we have in general what we try to instigate in our group is to have very strong guidelines with a code of conduct, a code of ethics, and but again, the principle is that you have to instigate a culture before setting rules. Of course, rules are rules. You have to comply with the rules, but really, very much the driver is to do more and more on the culture side.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you very much. I agree with you that we had a lot of discussions about the culture, that this anti-corruption, that should be part of our DNA. And without this, it's so difficult to have any changes in place. And culture, that's one of the crucial prerequisites that has to change. And considering what you have mentioned, there are local aspects, those presents and gifts. And in case of banking sector, the people would come up to the cashier. They might give a chocolate or a box of chocolates to the person in case of a holiday. And Mr. Zanelli, you have started to work on the control. And which other practices facilitate the further development of the control culture in your country and in Ukraine?
Thank you for the questions once again. I would say, there was a question for me, right?
Yeah.
I would say, let me give, let's say, maybe 5, normally we should say 3, but let's say 5 advices when it comes to compliance. First, it has been said many times, establish the right culture, establish the value, and give validity to that. Talk about it at every possible occasion. Make it part of the agenda, make it part of the roadmap, establish as something which is not only possible to talk, but is valuable to talk. Because sometimes there is, we give it for granted, or we don't want to touch this. I think, first of all, we need to establish this. And the second advice is set the tone from the top. So, me with my management team, etc., we put it clearly as an element. It is visible in our MANCOM management team agenda, which is published to everyone, so everybody can see, and everybody can see that we will discuss this. As well as the third one will be, okay, how can I voice something when I see that something uncompliant it is? So create a system with either anonymous or non-anonymous system where people can voice the something that has been observed. So a whistleblowing system, which I don't like it very much as a name, because the whistleblowing can be then finger pointed. So we call it in Nestle speak up. So tell us, and in fact we use these 2 words, speak up and tell us if you see something. And actually, of course, it's important to take care of that and ensure that you take care and going back to the people with your follow-up. Otherwise, you waste your efforts. The fourth element, I would say, really is about being consistent in the actions. Again, I repeat, give visibility to the actions, follow up on the actions, ensure that every item is well considered and communicate about it. And the fifth one is no tolerance for deviations. So when there is something observed, when something is verified, consistency between words and action is critically important, and no tolerance for actions. And I want also again to stay on the positive side. We had uncompliance situations in Nestle Ukraine. It's obvious, and I would say I will not be honest if I would not tell you today that we have not any problem. But this involved the 0.00% of our Nestle population. So you have to take care of all the compliant people that we have and partners that we have, ensuring that they are well aware of the fact that they are doing the right things and not focusing too much, let's say, on those that are doing the wrong things. Yes, as I mentioned before, no tolerance. And this is a way also to reward and award those that are following the good practices.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I would like us to talk about the following. Your evaluation of counteragents is probably your routine of compliance procedures everywhere in the world. It's true. International legislation increases its pressure. Anti-corruption legislation requires all of its companies to check and verify its counteragents. More often than not, Ukrainian companies do not realize why we have an anti-corruption law, which requires much less. And it is much less reliable for state-owned companies. So my question is to Ms. Dumas. Can you please tell us how you propagate and what practices you engage within the framework of this process? How do you explain to your counteragents that it's important?
Yes, thank you. We are present here in Ukraine since almost 30 years. Next year we will celebrate 30 years of presence in Ukraine. We are one of the main suppliers of chemical products for many industries. Caparol, Nestle are our customers, banks are our suppliers. So we kind of cooperate with a lot of partners with a very broad, we have about 300 plus customers here in Ukraine, probably the same number of suppliers. So when it comes to customers, we have a process which is called business partner due diligence, which is the responsibility of each account manager or each business unit to perform with a new customer or regularly at about 3 years with existing customers. Yeah, it's a relatively simple process. It's trying to get data from different sources, even from Google using keywords. Yeah, it's not super sophisticated or something. Then when it comes to suppliers, we always have anti-corruption clauses in the and compliance clauses in the contracts, yeah. And we also can require at any time to make an audit of a certain, for example, event or product or service that we have received. By the way, I did 1-2 weeks ago, very informal, just checking a spot check on an event, yeah. And I was very positively surprised to see that our supplier, not only that he was able in 1 day to send us all the necessary documents with all his further suppliers, but everything was very well organized, everything was very transparent and very clear and very compliant with the law. Yeah, all the acts of acceptance and all the primary documents, which you know. Yeah. So these are in principle is not nothing rocket science to do this. What is overarching is what Alessandro said before. We have a code of conduct, and actually we updated globally the code of conduct 1.5 years ago. And we made it more human. We came to the values, to the real values of the organization. Yeah, it has 5 chapters. It's we care, we earn trust. When we care, the main thing is we encourage everybody to speak up. Yeah, so as you see, we are quite a common practice across, yeah, and we want to create also the space for people to speak up freely and openly. We earn trust. This is about anti-corruption measures, what we are doing to avoid. We play fair. This goes into anti-competitive, anti-monopolistic situations, yeah. We respect and that goes very much cares very much about the international labor and social standards, which we are also highly committed to adhere to. And we protect, and here it's all our safety culture, all our personal data protection, digital behavior, and so on and so forth. These are the main chapters of our code of conduct. What is the most important? The message we give to our employees is use your gut feeling. It has a name in German which I cannot pronounce. Use your gut feeling and speak up. Now, speaking up in Ukraine is not an easy exercise. And probably you know why, because it's the same in my country. Because of the previous communist times, or the people which were speaking up were considered, I don't know the word in English, yeah.
Yeah, but we have like stuchat.
Yeah, so we also had our troubles here in Ukraine. And when we did an investigation and we were trying to understand the root cause, was also that people do not feel still the right environment and the right frame to speak up. So there is work to be done there for all of us, including in our organizations. Yeah.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I would like to address Mr. Vitali, because more often than not in my practice I am confronted with the fact that international companies have all of this framework that we are talking about now. Policies, procedures, code of conduct, all of this is in place, seemingly. Headquarters bring it all from top down and we localize that, but there is something missing, something that we call personnel engagement. So what are you doing about that? How are you fighting or tackling that? But probably it would be rather better to say how you're engaging your audiences, your employees. Yes, I truly believe that many companies have seen that from another perspective, when they have a mission and the vision of their own company, and all of this may be written on the walls, on posters, or on business cards. But once again, without reading that, not everybody will be mindful or remember these points. And even if they do try to remember, things will not be accurate, or the objectives will be different from what the owners set for themselves. And if you dig even deeper, what it means for you for every day, there will be such random answers. It will be even scary to hear that. So this disease is pervasive, and that's something we are working with. And probably via the introduction, the culture of dialogue. Culture itself speaks in favor of something that it takes a long time, not a year or two. I don't know how long this will take. But this still enables us to swap our opinions, to set a certain kind of agenda for further communication. So this builds trust. And when we articulate and talk with different external moderators, we can arrive at many other things. Another pathway that can be also taken is to nail it down. We need to nail these important things in the walls. And once again, I'm talking provisionally about the walls, because we signed memoranda here last year on tackling corruption, anti-corruption issues, and that's something that is enshrined in documents. We see these words, these actions, and certain anti-corruption policy implemented in the company. We organize certain meetings on this issue, and on the 11th of December we're going to also have some tests and communication, so people will not just be listening but also taking tests for their understanding of anti-corruption policies. But we do not so much care about evaluation or the assessment, but for making sure that people will have to listen carefully, because it's all about engagement and talking about the culture of dialogue. All of these things are really workable. But these changes are not tangible, especially within short-term perspective. Only some 9 to 12 months you begin to see and witness that people get talking about these new elements of communication. They begin to believe in this. They buy into that. And at different interviews that you have with your employees, you ask, why have you chosen Kappa role? You're working with anti-corruption. In my previous company, I was so tired of that, and I want to be involved in something bigger. And it's such a pleasant, unexpected surprises that we have because of such interviews. We also record different sustainable goals together with our counteragents. It takes a lot of our effort and energy, and then we begin to embed it into our culture. Once again, I cannot say we don't have any of these issues in our company, but anyway, I would say that these days we understand about that much more than some 2 years ago, because so many more people now are aware of why we do that and what exactly we are doing and what consequences will there be in the future. Thank you very much indeed that you stress the importance of communication. Something I would like to share is that one of the international companies based here in Ukraine, for one of them, for a long time it took us to think about how to create greater engagement connected with their code of conduct. And they made it in a series of comics to make it easier and more comprehensible for people. It's another channel of communication which engages our internal brain channels. So once again, to communicate to people that we need to communicate more. Today we talk about anti-corruption a lot, but I can't help asking Mr. Burani about something else, because a week ago the National Bank of Ukraine announced that it will be encouraging the banking and financial system of Ukraine to disclose non-financial data, and not only financial institutions will be encouraged to do that, but also to evaluate which projects banks will fund in the future. So I would like to ask you, how are you doing that? Are you assessing any of these criteria already and any of your institutions? Because it seems to me it could be a significant driver for Ukrainian economy to implement best practices. Thank you.
Actually, I think it's only positive for Ukraine to have international players in the market, because in any case there is a certain degree of improvement that is still it is instilled in the market when you have players coming from the outside and see the things as they are happening with different eyes. In terms of let's say strategy, what we do in terms of compliance, have in mind that we basically bought this bank 14 years ago, and we bought from a local tycoon, and you can imagine how the situation was when we bought the bank in terms of compliance. It's much different to respond to a single local shareholder or to have to deal with an international shareholder having very heavy requirements on corruption, money laundering, anti-terrorism financing, financial crime. We have, I mean, our mantra every morning we wake up is to keep the name of not the bank, but the group at a very high level. So one of the things that we do, everything we do is driven by the necessity to clean to keep clean our name out from any possible other than, because we are again a particular animal, a bank is a regulated entity. We not only incur in fine if we do something wrong, but we also have a damage to the name of the bank, of the group, which is an international one. Ukraine is a small thing vis-à-vis the entire business of the group. It's one of the largest financial groups in Europe and in the world, and it's a fantastic name in the market. So we don't want to damage this. And in doing this, of course, we have. We have to abide to a good number, I would say an integrated control, internal control system. But again, compliance in actual facts, what do we do? First of all, on the top of everything is the know your customer exercise. Sometimes customers are not happy, let's say pissed off, when you make a lot of questions. But you have to be sure that we, at least as international group operating here, we want to be sure that we don't touch anything that we don't want to touch, that we should not touch. So whoever wants to have the benefit of working for an international bank, and I think all the international banks work with the same standards, I think you have to be aware that you have to pass a sort of a due diligence. So the bank is a partner, and you need to disclose to a partner a great number of information. And once this happens, we are very happy to work with you. So, and what do we do in simple terms? Apart from the know your customer exercise that stays on the top, you have basically 3 levels of controls. And these 3 levels of controls are, first of all, on one side, operations and clients relations. And it's very important, as I was saying before, to have to instigate the culture of compliance to the people that are in operations and they handle day-to-day business with the customer. Then on the second level, you have a compliance department and a risk management department. And the third layer, so you have 3 levels of control, you have audit. And of course, audit periodically checks, but audit is not police. Audit will tell you whatever was done possibly in a perfectible way and help you to steer yourself in the right direction. And then, of course, very important, I would say, everything is in the hand of compliance department. We actually have a very powerful lady here that is actually member of the management board. And basically, compliance monitors that the internal rules and the bank works within the laws. So we take a board of the laws and we comply with them. And compliance has a veto right on any decision. She participates, actually actively participates and contributes, I would say more than participate, to the management board, and she participates in all committees. And again, as a bank, we have a complicated structure. We have a number of committees, and she has really a good veto right on any decision that is not in compliance with internal rule and external rules. But more important than this is that we do not arrive to the point of blocking something. Again, the culture, 360 degrees within the bank is the most crucial thing. It's because you have to understand what you're doing. So why it is not right to take a gift from a customer, because you have to understand that there is something bigger than this, and the interest of the family you are working within, because the bank is a family for us. So it's like any other company. So you don't want to damage this family. So you do in the interest, not on your small little interest, against the interest of your bigger family.
Thank you. And the time moves so fast. And then I just ask you maybe a couple of words, like the one advice for the leader of the Ukrainian companies who are on the beginning of the process to implement the compliance, or just only thinking about the compliance. Just few words, because we haven't a lot of time for that.
I will make it very, very simple. Balance, trust, and control. As a manager, as an owner of a small business, you have to entrust people to do that. Otherwise, you cannot grow. Yeah. But once in a while, you need to step in and control. And control is not bad. Actually, if you do it right and if you put it in the right perspective, everybody is happy to be controlled, because this can also show how good she is or he is in doing his own job. Yeah. So this is my final thought.
Thanks.
Very good point, Tiberio. So I would say in the same line, first of all, establish why you want to be compliant. What is the value of compliance within your company, and what definition of compliance you have? I was mentioning before, do the right things for the right reasons at every time. That can be one, and this should be a guiding principle. Controls, yes, establish your system of control, engage everyone in compliance, so it's everyone's responsibility. And third, Tiberio was saying controls are important, but in absence of control, what binds us together is our values. So ensure that the values of the companies are very strong so that the people knows how to act, also when there are no controls.
Thanks.
Okay. It's hard to add something, but I would like to add, so don't give up, set clear targets, measure it, and of course, for further improvement, you have to celebrate even small success, small achievement.
Thank you so much, dear panelists. Like as mentioned, the time moves really fast.
Totally in agreement of what was said, but of course there is one small point that I wanted to, something that I want to pass to the people here, is that one of the big topics that we have at on the table at the moment is how to adhere not to just regulations, but also to principles. And I'm talking about the famous ESG principle, environment, social, and governance. No, governance translates to transparency, and an environment is a big topic, a big thing on the table on everybody. We have to do something for the future. We have to do something for the next generations, if we want to survive, if we want to be proud of something that we are doing now that can be delivered to the next generations. And I think modern companies have to, and we are doing this, but I think everybody here in the room is conscious about this, the necessity to do something on this. So I think it's a really a crucial point. And I take it personally, so we are sort of, and when I'm saying you have to convince your people that it's good to do something, I think it's very easy to convince your people that they have to stick to ESG principles and do and work in this direction.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and I think we should complete our discussion. I think maybe ESG will be the next year topic, really hard to discuss. And then thank you so much. Дякую дуже, вибачте.
Thank you very much indeed. We are much appreciative of your discussion, and we thank our panelists for being here with us today. I think we will have some further meetings, and we thank Global Compact for this opportunity. Thank you, Olena. Thank you, panelists. Olena has just made this discussion well-balanced, because in the Global UN Compact, it's impossible to engage in discussions where there are only men. An interesting point that women can stay exclusively female in their company, but men mustn't be exclusively male in their company. And now we are moving on to the Ukrainian part of our today's program. We have two more companies with us today who are being engaged in the signing of the Memorandum on Joint Efforts and Action. And the first to sign this memorandum, I am inviting Ms. Olena Boychenko, member of the board and director of a HR department of Naftogaz Company. Naftogaz Company is the largest group of companies of the energy and fuel complex, which is there to protect the interests of energy independence of Ukraine and is a safeguard for the budget of Ukraine. It takes care of the future generations, and one of its strategic purposes is accelerating assets of the green energy for energy transformation of Naftogaz and decarbonization of Ukrainian economy. So, Ms. Olena, you are welcome to sign this memorandum. This is for you to sign. Thank you very much. Please stay around. because the next company which I am inviting to sign is Interpipe. Andrei Korotkov, Director of Operational Activities of this company. Interpipe is a large industrial Ukrainian company, one of the largest employers in Ukraine. The structure of the company covers 5 manufacturing facilities in the Dnipropetrovsk region and some offices in Europe, in the United States and Middle East. 10,000 employees work for this company, and it's the largest private investor. It has already invested over $1 billion in the construction of a modern metal melting facility, which is in compliance of the most stringent requirements, and thus it has become one of the first Ukrainian companies that has already gone through energy transformation and now is 100% compliant with EU requirements. Mr. Andriy, you're welcome to sign here.
Thank you. Thank you. So please also stay around. We will start the panel discussion on how the Ukrainian businesses see the issues of anti-corruption and collective actions on combating corruption. Would there be an equal conversations in between of the public and the private sector? Can we complement one another? I'd like to invite you to this discussion. We have one more speaker, the Dtac Company. The Dtac Company, I've already mentioned this company. And when we've initiated this initiative, it wasn't clear whether we should interfere at all. And we've started the conversations with our companies in order to understand whether they would be interested in doing so. And the Dtac Company was the first one that we've contacted, and it was an immediate response: yes, we will join this initiative. So, Maxim Timchenko, I'm very happy to invite you to this discussion. Dtac is one of the largest private investors into the energy field of Ukraine, and the new strategy until 2030. Dtac committed to transform its business in a more energy-saving and efficient business based on the ESG principle. And ESG provides for transparency and prevention of any corruption. And Maxim, we'll start with you. What do you think is happening in Ukraine? And can we have equal sort of conversations between private and public sectors? Is there business opportunities? Well, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to join this event. We were among the first companies to sign the memorandum, and already a year has passed since that, and it's great that our colleagues followed our example, and we see that there is an increased environment of stakeholders interested in fighting the corruption, and I'm sure that the future of Ukraine cannot be imagined without combating corruption, and I'm confident that there will be a moment in Ukraine's history when Ukraine would no longer be associated with this term corruption. And now whenever we are talking to our Western partners and investors, the very first question we get is, when do we forget about the words corruption, war, problems with the investment climate from the media coverages? And I believe that the public authorities have to clearly understand that the successful future of our country is something that is impossible to achieve without enormous investments, and the investment potential inside Ukraine is not that significant. We would like to have some external foreign investments, and investments, they could not exist without a trust of investors to the public authorities, and the trust could not be built without the combating efforts against the corruption. This is something that has to exist. And therefore, I believe that the current situation, the public authorities that should not interfere within the business, and the business should not be interfering with public regulations. If those principles will stay, then we will have a situation when there is a combating corruption actions and the business is participating in that. The business, and I'd like to particularly underline the importance of integrity business, has a role to play in the lack of corruption, because this so-called political pressure, I'd say that's a form of corruption, really. And I'm confident that if you decided to build an integral business, then that's a responsibility of the government, on the society and the business to fight the corruption, which creates the preconditions that are so important for Ukraine to, succeed. Recently, we have a lot of talks on how the state and the business could reinforce one another. And unfortunately, we have to say there's multiple factors when the state is asking business for help, that business owes the state something. And then, on the other hand, there is no recognition that the business is the driver of changes, and that the business is specifically the one that creates the new ecosystem with the ESG principles, with the sustainable goals, with 10 principles of global compact of the UN. So we want to build this platform for the normal communication between the business and the state, so there would be understanding between of them. So the state would see how the business can have an impact on the development of the country's reputation. And at the same time, they should recognize that the business really is the motivating factor, is the driving force for our country. So thank you very much for this wide, certain picture. Andrew, you're supplying countries in 80 states of the world, but still you are procuring a lot of products, and you have from tens of thousands of companies. So your anti-corruption programs, do they help you with the development of reputation of the brand, or developing that ecosystem around your country? Well, thank you. I'm happy to join you. Indeed, the products that we produce is currently being sold in many countries around the world, and much of the products is being sold in foreign countries. And it's not only about the investments in technology and the quality and the professionalism and the experience of our employees. It's also about the investments in relationship inside the countries, in between of the employees, in our relationship to our customers and counter agents. And of course, we are willing to have those relationships as much transparent and integral as possible. And of course, fighting corruption is one of the key aspects of our activity. We're not alone in this activity, in this fight, as was already mentioned today, and a lot of SMEs and global companies of different forms of ownership, they're interested in this sort of relationship, and they're implementing all those principles. Therefore, it's all about the global activity. And I would like to touch upon several aspects today of our internal anti-corruption activity, and some of the other aspects that do have certain relation to our customers and suppliers. Talking about the internal relations, I'd say there are a number of key aspects of importance. We keep trying to explain, to persuade our employees that any types of stealing or power abuse in our company is unacceptable in our company, not in a single level, not in a single scale. And whenever the management of the company is fighting consistently against any abusers, is implementing procedures to reduce the risks of abusers. This helps most of the employees to follow the principles. It makes their work easier. It's easier for them. They feel more confident. On the other hand, it's not a secret, there is always some people that violate the existing principles. But for them, it becomes more difficult to sort of employ those violations. Another important factor is the personal position of every single manager. My colleagues, in these conversations with our employees and the communications with our employees, we keep telling them that working integrally is very important, and any violations would result in punishment. And this is going to be inevitable. This is going to be equal to all and everyone. And you can have different experience, you can have different positions or different achievements in the company, but still, if someone has committed a violation or abuse of power, then it could be a high level of manager, it can be a technical expert with unique knowledge, it doesn't matter. Then there will be a punishment, and we keep demonstrating and implementing that, because we do believe that this approach, which is based on equality, is something that is absolutely crucial, and we need to comply with that. In this case, we will demonstrate all the employees that it doesn't matter who you are. If you have committed a violation, or if you stole something, or if you abused of something, then there will be a punishment. It's important that those actions would be public and transparent. You should not hide any evidences like that, thinking of any damages to reputation of the company. No, it's not. We believe that whenever you go public, in case of any violations or abuses, then the rest of the employees would be clearly understanding that this is something that may happen to them, so they would really understand the principles of work within the company. They would understand that the punishment is something that is inevitable. If the company gets damage, then it will try to take actions provided under Ukrainian legislation to counter all those violations. Of course, we could not substitute the public authorities, but still we're trying to assist them in making sure that all the existing processes are implemented to full degree. And of course, there could not be an ideal status in this sort of struggle. And every year, and this is not a secret, we are talking about this openly, we're talking about this to different mass media, so unfortunately every day we do find some employees in our company that may commit some abuses or violations. And unfortunately we do have some cases like that per year, but we will continue fighting against this, because you should keep on working no matter everything. Well, recognition of this problem and lack of hiding out of those issues is important because we understand the culture of the country that we live in. So your recognition is a step towards fighting this challenge. This was something that the previous speakers clearly mentioned, that there has to be a zero tolerance. But even if there are cases of violations, those cases, they should be clearly demonstrative for everyone else. Yes, for everyone else would clearly understand that they should not behave in an appropriate manner. Now, Olena, I have a question to you. The Naftogaz company, that's a public sector, and your culture could be somehow different from the private sector because the private sector develops faster. So what is the hardest leverage for changing this culture? What's your feelings? Thank you for the invitation, first of all. This is a very interesting and practical discussion. As I'm dealing with the compliance issues in our company, exists long ago. It's a national company, and unfortunately for many years the company was having a lot of issues with regards to corruption and corrupt practices. Although thankful to our team, we've managed to change the situation for a couple of years already. Naftogaz is the example of implementing reforms among the other private or public companies. And I cannot say that we don't have any challenges and that we succeeded everything. As I've already mentioned, we are in a society, and unfortunately people tend to tolerate corruption still. Yet we clearly understand that the scale, the nature of the business that we represent, we are the gatekeepers of Ukrainian energy independence. That's something that puts certain responsibility on us and the way we do the business. And speaking of the compliance and the compliance culture, the word culture is very important. And changing the culture is something that poses as the most significant challenge. And we'll look at the culture from several dimensions. The culture is implemented within the company at several levels, at the systems, at symbols and behavior. Speaking of the systems, for 5 years already, Naftogaz has this compliance function which is developing, and we have transformational changes every year. There is a code of ethics, the functions are centralized, and we have dozens of companies in the business. We have 50,000 of employees. We have center of expertise of compliance is something that is very important. We have a code of ethics and has been established 5 years ago, and we make it more human-like. That is our task, to make it more accessible, more interesting and understandable. We need to tell the people why this is something that exists, why it's important that you are compliant, that you are respecting the counter-agents, your colleagues and employees. Speaking of other systems, it's all about the operational models, which is also subject to transformation. We think the outcome of transformations and the control points that we have, that they need further development. And speaking of other systems, the system of wages and salaries, which is market-oriented, which is all about the offer of justified reward to those people that bring value to the company and the nation. And that recruiting, the hiring system, for the first time, I think, in the history of our company, we have an open challenge competition for searching the talents. We have a competition of 5 individuals per single position with motivational letters, with tasks, with experts that put a high value on human potential. But we can be better, really. Speaking of the symbols
is a reflection of the culture to a certain degree. And I can give you an example of the office environment, and we tend to change in that as well. We, I think, are among the first public companies that start to work in open space. That's a significant breakthrough of the culture. In this case, the change of information goes faster, the share of information goes faster, and the hierarchical structure of the country changes as well. It's an example of how the compliance culture is being implemented, because in the open and transparent environment, there are far less number of factors that promote the illicit behavior or some behavior that we would not like to see. And the other important aspect, the crucial one, that's the behavior, how the person is thinking, behaving, when talking. We already mentioned about the role of the leaders, and I'm not adding to that anything, but still it's very important. And by the way, whenever we talk about leaders, that's the leaders at all levels. It could be shift supervisor or manager. They could show, to demonstrate why it's important to have an environmental safety, a labor safety. So there are many challenges. There is a lot of work, and we understand that we cannot allow ourselves to stop and to praise the results. Because our scale and our presence in many regions of Ukraine allows us to think that if we'll succeed, we'll tend to change the environment that is not always friendly, is not always the one that promotes the culture of compliance. But I hope that together we will succeed. We will be able to achieve a lot. Well, yeah, we are creating the ecosystem when it's better, when it's easier to change this culture. Speaking of Maxim, speaking of the examples, how the large business may impact the change of this culture, and can you share any successes of your company, any specific results in countering corruption? Well, I believe personal example is the best way of fighting the corruption. That your own example tends to influence the behavior of your employees and behavior of companies. Speaking of Dtac, since the establishment in 2005, our company was developing as the transparent and open company. Speaking on the ESG concept, we were among the first companies to introduce that concept on the Ukrainian market. We started talking about that. We started changing our systems. We started developing strategies. We have a separate ESG strategy. And that's not for the perfect picture. That's part of our corporate culture, because the success depends on your presence on the financial market. And our colleagues previously mentioned that the banks today have a number of markers in place, and if you're not complying with requirements, you won't be able to accessing the capitals, you won't be able to develop the business. And this is very clear and understandable chain. So with your behavior, you need to demonstrate the example. You need to set this example. A good example. I think that was the story with connections, and I think that everyone is aware of that. I wouldn't like to say that it's a corruption example, but still, there was some sort of Soviet heritage. In order to switch an apartment or a house to the energy grid, you would need to pay a lot of money and a lot of bribes to make sure this is happening. And I guess not only in this specific case, but in many other cases, I would say digitalization is something that plays an important role. Now, 80% of the connections in our company are conducted via the personal space, personal office on the internet. In the beginning it was only 2%, now it's 80%. So any person can create a personal office online, and he can contact the company online as well. And this terminates any mediators that could be available in there. And unfortunately, some are still existing. So now there would be no rooms for any corruption or anything like that in terms of connecting to energy grids. And that's a solution, that's an example when the digitalization is used to neutralize any opportunities for corruption while connecting to the grids. And today we have a common project with the MDT. We could use DIA for getting an information on connection to the electricity grids. This is another example of combating corruption when connecting to the electricity grids. Then we have another project of MTT on the change of suppliers. And in order to change the supplier for the energy or the gas, you can do that pretty fast through DIA, through this new project. And I think that digitalization is one of the key tools to counter corruption. I agree with that. I believe that the whole international community agrees to that as well, because under the frames of the anti-corruption program, there is a separate direction in terms of digitalization. Many countries have already proven that digitalization helps to counter the corruption. So thank you very much for your examples. We've already had conversation with multiple companies that are implementing the same principles in their own companies. So the next work for our working group would be to raise the topic of digitalization. What can we do in the frames of our program to promote this idea in the businesses and in the state? So thank you very much. Now, Andriy, speaking of digitalization, your company has become among the first one to introduce the corporate procurement platform online. Any results that you can share with us? Any outcomes, any impact on the reputation of the company? Well, indeed. Back in 2013, the company started the implementation of procurements through the e-tender platform. So the principle is not new. That is something that exists in the world for many years. So we decided to follow the best practices. And of course, the process was not fast, was not easy. We had to break the mentality, the approaches. We had to teach the people, as not all the employees were ready from the technical standpoint and from a professional standpoint. We're ready to use that tool, but still, in 2016, the company switched to procuring products and services through the e-trading platform. And currently, we have over 2,000 customers that are working with us through this mechanism. We have over 4,000 tenders per year, several billions of Ukrainian hryvnia spent per year. So that allowed us to move away from the human factor, from the impact of certain individuals. Of course, not everything is ideal. Of course, we need to do some additional work to reveal something, because the human mind, well, tends to, work in a very creative way in some cases when they're willing to get a fortune. So it's all about the elements of control that we need to implement. The financial services, the internal audit departments, they keep controlling certain procedures. Other risky departments or risky managers. There's something that we have, but As I've already mentioned, and as others already mentioned, you cannot move ahead without the elements of control. It should be based on the clear principles. It should exist, and this is something we implement. Otherwise, we'll have a corruption, but on the other way, on the other side. And we have already a result of this activity, and currently we are trying to introduce the other procurements, including the logistical functions, and to make sure they will be implemented through the platform as well. And we believe this is the right way, and we will not return to the past mechanisms. And this is really an example that shows that the company will work for many years. And should we have the digital solutions, we have to invest it. And still we would understand that the return of the funds would only come up in 5 to 10 years. And these ESG principles, they are capable of bringing some financial results to the company. Olena, going back to you, we've talked about the culture and the internal factors, and could you tell us the factor, the external factor that would have a great role to play in terms of changing the situation inside and outside of the country with regards to the tolerance to corruption? That's a difficult question, because society is people, people are the culture, and culture, that's something that is most difficult to change. The external factor, I mentioned this in my previous comment, but still, we are a part of a global context. And as Maxim mentioned, that it's not the financial assessment of your activity, but the ESG is something that will prevail later on in assessing the value of your business. The importance of understanding this factor should promote other businesses, private and public enterprises, and SMEs later on in popularization of the compliance and ESG standards. And hopefully together we will create the environment in which the culture of total non-tolerance or zero tolerance to corruption will prevail, will become a tradition. And I don't want to dramatize, as Ukraine made a lot of steps forward. There are businesses that serve as examples for many other companies, and we can see some examples at the household level. The level of corruption in kindergartens and schools has been reduced, and it's very good. And it's good that this new generation, the young generation of people, they have their own values to pursue and I think that it will naturally support those attempts and the inspirations of the companies. So the largest difficulty is the inconsistency of actions when we are not working together, when we are not understanding the importance of combating corruption, the importance of implementing the ESG standards. And when do we understand this together? Whenever we talk about this at these sort of activities, whenever we talk about this to the media and to the kids. Now this brings hopes that our activities will not go in vain. Thank you very much. And I will not use too much of your time and trust. One small question to all of the speakers. What would you like to wish to those businesses, to young people, not only in Ukraine but in other countries, in the sphere of zero tolerance to corruption or fighting the corruption? Which factors are so important that you can take them and start working? This is something that is absolutely important for those who are not with us but who are watching online, so that we could inspire others to act. Please, briefly, every one of you. Well, I believe that it's important to be honest to one another and to oneself as well. We're talking about household corruption, corruption in business, corruption in among the supreme leadership. And if the person has made a choice for himself that he wants to build a modern country and he wants to live in, and he wants this country to be prosperous, and he wants to change the society for the relations between the society, business, and the public agencies would be built on the integral processes and mechanisms, so that not a single part of this triangle would prevail. And if we will pursue with the standards at work in our relationship to police, to public, to tax administration, to regulators, then we will be able to accomplish all that. So if we will build this environment in our companies, that they will feel that they are working in an honest and decent company, if we will have this zero tolerance to corruption, not in words but in the way we live, if we will demonstrate this to large businesses, to the public, to the SMEs, I guess this is something that's the most important. Well, in a couple of words, I would like to wish everyone not to be afraid to be honest, to be demanding to oneself, to your colleagues, and to your partners as well, which is crucial, because sometimes it's uncomfortable and inconvenient, and still, if we are willing to create a unified society with zero tolerance to corruption, then everyone should have a same position, and we should be, as I've said, as others said, you should be demanding to oneself and to people around you. Where to start with? That's a difficult question, really. What is corruption? What is the development of corruption? And we should seek an answer to that. You need to analyze that. Speaking on the culture, what is the culture in your company? This is how people behave when they're not monitored. And thinking of an answer to the question, what is the corruption? What is the unethical business? By finding the answer, by implementing that personally in the business, in the school, in private life. I think this is something that brings us hope that the social behavior would change and the business behavior would change as well. Thank you. So, understanding what is the corruption, start with yourself, become a leader, make single rules for everyone. These are some of the wishes that we would like to have for the upcoming generation, for the other companies that we would like to join us and sign the memorandum of joint actions on combating corruption. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to the speakers for explaining their positions. Thank you for sharing all of this, because it's very important when leaders understand where are they taking their companies. And thank you everyone who joined us online or in this very room. I think together we can do more, and I'd like to take this opportunity and to congratulate my team, because these are the people that make it possible for those activities to be conducted, because it's very important. It's very difficult to have these speakers. Daria Rubin, that's the manager of our project on anti-corruption. It's with their assistance that we can conduct these activities. Then Irina Konovalchenko, our operational director, the person that is always close, was always ready to assist in any situation. People whose work everyone can see, but when nobody knows, how it's all organized. Now, Director on Communication, Dtac. I think everyone should know you because you work many hours so that everyone would know what's happening in the global UN compact. Marian Snezhinska, manager on communications as well. And I can't see our designer, the newest member of our team to just join us, Valeria Pinchuk. She made the visuals for us so that everyone could see us from anywhere. And then Vlad, thank you. You have recently joined the team, but we already feel your support that helps our team to work in a high quality manner. So thank you everyone. If there is a chance to join our coffee break, then I would be grateful for any feedbacks that you might give us and how you can see our further cooperation. So hopefully in a year we will be proud of our new project. Thank you.